We've done countless videos surrounding unsolved mysteries in the past, be it strange disappearances of YouTubers, unsolved crime cases, you name it. However, today we wanted to take a look at something a little bit different. Here are 5 unsolved mysteries that have finally been solved. Number 5. The tale of Atlantis is one of Greek legend that speaks of what many believe to have been the most advanced civilization to have ever lived. History.com described Atlantis as an island larger than Libya and Asia put together, located in the Atlantic Ocean just beyond the Pillars of Hercules and the Strait of Gibraltar. Its culture was advanced and it had a constitution suspiciously similar to the one outlined in Plato's Republic. It was protected by the god Poseidon, who made his son Atlas king and namesake of the island and the ocean that surrounded it. As the Atlanteans grew powerful, their ethics declined. Their armies eventually conquered Africa as far as Egypt and Europe as far as Italy, before being driven back by an Athenian alliance. Later, by way of divine punishment, the island was beset by earthquakes and floods and sank into a muddy sea. The story of Atlantis is widely believed to have been invented by Plato. However, this isn't entirely true. While Plato is largely responsible for the modern interpretation of Atlantis, Plato had actually mentioned before his death that the story had been relayed to him by his grandfather, who had heard it from an Athenian statesman who had heard it from a priest. So while we can't be certain exactly where the story originated, we can be certain of one thing: Atlantis never actually existed. Plato himself mentioned that he didn't believe that Atlantis had ever existed, and with modern research, as well as our knowledge about how Earth's tectonic plates work, it's been proven to be literally impossible for an entire continent to simply sink, let alone a continent the size of Asia. The tale of Atlantis was only ever intended to provoke critical thinking, and bring awareness to the dangers of a single country becoming too powerful. Number 4. With a name that makes every teenage boy chuckle, Deep Throat was a secret informant during the US government's notorious Watergate scandal. Watergate took place in the 1970s and involved a break-in at the Watergate office in Washington, D.C. This break-in was deployed by Nixon in an attempt to cover up some of the wrongdoings that were taking place while he was in office. Most notably, he had bugged and recorded government offices. The FBI was called in to investigate the case and arrested 5 men for the break-in. During their investigations into the men's motives, they found that the men had been paid for the event, and the money they received had come from a committee that was heavily involved in President Nixon's re-election campaign. Following this discovery, many of Nixon's staff turned on him and revealed to the FBI that Nixon had been recording top-secret government meetings, an act which was strictly forbidden by the Constitution and countless national laws. Nixon was then forced to release the tapes, but erased substantial portions of them before doing so. This led to widespread belief of a cover-up and almost certainly guaranteed that Nixon was going to be impeached. However, before this could happen, he resigned.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
So how is Deep Throat involved in this? Well, Deep Throat was an informant who leaked crucial information regarding the Nixon investigation, as well as information regarding the men who broke into news outlets, most notably the Post. Without Deep Throat, it's very likely that Nixon's wrongdoings would have gone unnoticed by the public, and American citizens would not have been informed about the scandal until Nixon's ultimate resignation. Deep Throat only ever met with a few news reporters in an underground parking garage near Roslyn. He never showed his face and went by the name Deep Throat in order to mask his identity. However, in 2005, over 30 years after the scandal, it was finally revealed that Deep Throat was former FBI Associate Director Mark Felt. While Mark Felt's involvement with the Watergate scandal was suspected as early as 1975, his identity remained concealed until mid-2005, when 2 former Washington Post reporters released his identity. Somewhat surprisingly, no charges were ever placed against him, though this was likely due to the fact that he was 92 and suffering from dementia when this information came out. Number 3. Over the years, hundreds of researchers have attempted to explain just how the Egyptian pyramids were built, as the boulders that they're made of seem to have been far too heavy to have been lifted without some sort of machinery. However, the process may have been much more simple than you think. The earliest Egyptian pyramids were built sometime around 2600 BC. Early pyramids were designed by the architect Imhotep, and are widely considered to be the oldest known masonry-crafted structures. For years, the exact techniques used to build the Egyptian pyramids remained unknown, with some even speculating that they could have been placed there by aliens. However, modern research suggests that this process may have been much simpler than most people thought. According to Live Science, physicists at the University of Amsterdam investigated the forces needed to pull weighty objects on a giant sled over desert sand, and discovered that dampening the sand in front of the primitive device reduced friction on the sled, making it easier to operate. To make their discovery, the researchers picked up on clues from ancient Egyptians themselves. A wall painting discovered in an ancient tomb of a king, which dates back to 1900 BC, depicts 172 men hauling an immense statue using ropes attached to a sled. In the drawing, a person can be seen standing in front of the sled pouring water over the sand. The researcher and his colleagues constructed miniature sleds and experimented with pulling heavy objects through the trays of sand. When the researchers dragged the sleds over the sand, they noticed clumps would build up in front of the contraptions, requiring more force to pull them across. Adding water to the sand, however, increased its stiffness, and the sleds were able to glide more easily across the surface. This is because the droplets of water created bridges between the grains of sand, which helps them stick together. It's also the same reason why using wet sand to build a sandcastle is much easier than using dry sand. These sleds would then be taken up giant ramps used to place the blocks at the highest portions of the pyramid. A pretty simple process when you think about it. Number 2. Now, this one may seem a bit ridiculous to some of you. However, the fact is, a surprisingly large number of people still believe that the Loch Ness Monster exists. Allegedly, the Loch Ness Monster was an aquatic creature, believed to be a plesiosaur that lives in Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. The creature has been described as being extremely large, long-necked, and had multiple humps on his back that stick out of the water. The creature's existence was first popularly brought to light in 1934, when a surgeon released a photograph which he claimed to be the monster. Following this, countless photographs of the alleged beast began pouring into local news outlets, sending the creature into international spotlight. This led multiple film and news crews to the alleged location of the monster, with later efforts even involving film crews diving below the surface of Loch Ness in an attempt to capture any sort of evidence of the creature. However, all efforts proved to be unfruitful, and no concrete evidence was ever discovered. In recent years, the original photographer of the 1934 photograph also conceded that the photo was faked, leading many to assume that the creature does not exist at all. Number 1. The strange disappearance of Amelia Earhart is by far one of the most well-known mysteries in the world. However, only just recently did we finally find out what likely happened to her. Amelia Earhart was an American pilot who set many world records of her time, and was also the first female to fly alone from Hawaii to the US mainland. However, Earhart mysteriously disappeared in 1937 during her attempts to fly around the entire perimeter of the Earth. While some believe that Amelia crashed and ultimately died at sea, that's been recently proven to be false, with the most promising reason for her disappearance being that she was actually captured by the Japanese. Evidence suggesting this has come up countless times over the years, with most of it coming from Japanese citizens themselves. In 2009, one of Earhart's family members claimed to have been in contact with Japanese troops, who led them to believe that she was captured and that her craft was broken apart and thrown into the ocean, to make it appear as though she crashed. These accusations mirrored a report from 1993, in which pilot Henry Andre claims to have been in Japan, assisting in its aviation industry, when he uncovered information that led him to believe that Earhart had actually been shot down by the Japanese in 1937. Finally, in 2017, the History Channel ran a televised special titled Amelia Earhart, The Lost Evidence, in which they uncovered a photograph from the National Archives which appears to depict Amelia Earhart, as well as her navigator Fred Noonan. Noonan was confirmed to have been in the photograph by a facial recognition expert, while Amelia was believed to have been in the background on a dock, facing away from the camera. Her appearance in the photograph was confirmed due to her hair, physique, and posture. The photo is said to have been taken at Jaluit Atoll, which is a series of islands in the Pacific Ocean. It's believed that this photo was taken after Earhart and Noonan crashed near Mealy Atoll, with physical evidence also suggesting this. It's believed that the two were then captured and transported to Saipan, where they eventually died in Japanese custody. Now, strictly in the interest of full disclosure, it's important to note that the History Channel's take on Amelia's disappearance has been called into question, and many of the statements they made during the broadcast were proven to be false. Though even with this taken into account, testimonies from Japanese troops who were on site at the time of Amelia's disappearance have confirmed that without a doubt she was captured by the Japanese and ultimately died in captivity. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.